when we first met, I do have real estate experience.
Okay.
Before this consultant, for that, I was in banking, specifically mortgage-backed securities.
Okay.
Our clients were the Lehman Brothers, the Salomon Brothers, and all that, and we were kind of running the portfolios from there. Is more of a technical and reporting job, if anything else. And because my brother's a home builder, I got into flipping houses in my early 20s, and got into rental properties and all that type of stuff. And with all that exposure, when we first met, it was the first time I ever heard the word land bank.
Okay.
Which maybe I should have been paying attention more. And
not necessarily.
And a couple other kind of key terms. And I just realized there's a whole other world of real estate out there that's different than everything that I just talked about.
Yep.
And so, and then on top of that, as I got to know you, boy, you very much are an expert in that space of real estate.
Thank you.
To the fact that you've got software and now consulting around it,
right.
Et cetera. So
it's funny when someone says that, because I think to myself, gosh, the world of what I don't think I know is so massive compared to what I think I do know.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is I try to just remain humble. Like, I'm not an expert. I know many things. I'm expert relative to somebody.
Right.
But there's a whole group of people who are way more expert than I am.
Right.
And that's been a real interesting learning experience for me, because I think when I started out my career, I felt like I was much more of a know-it-all.
Yeah.
And I felt like I wanted to try to impress upon people all the stuff that I knew.
Yep.
And now I find myself like the impulse to do that is still there, but I'm also trying to like check myself and go like, maybe they don't want your expertise. Maybe that's not what they're asking for.
Yeah.
And so anytime anybody describes me that way, I always get this like, should I own that, or should I push back on that? Anyway, so.
No, it's very common. I think we're probably the same 20-something-year-old when we enter the job market. I could do this better. This is ridiculous, and then you learn. So maybe we're not experts. We're just experienced at this point.
I think so, and I think what I tell people about my expertise is I'm like, I know many things about many topics.
Yeah.
I try to be transparent about what I don't know. So as an example, I just came from a conversation where there's a group that wanted to hire us, and when I asked the guy who had reached out to me, I was like, we didn't know each other. I said, how did you find me? Or he said, well, I knew somebody who's working in Maryland where you're doing a project, and they spoke really highly of you. And I was like, wow, we just started that project like 2 weeks ago. Like,
awesome.
We don't even know them. And so he brought me into this project where, I don't know if without getting into too many details, but this is not an uncommon situation where they thought they had a project to do this particular thing. Then they realized they didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't really know what the thing was they were trying to build, and they realized they were like missing a key piece. So they reached out to me to try to see if I could help provide some clarity. And what ended up happening was I pitched them on a bunch of ideas that I thought would be interesting, and they immediately seized on it, and then they wanted to hire me. And now all of a sudden I'm the consultant, and I'm like,
whoa.
So this whole project, it has been sort of like, I'm just a creative guy here. You might want to verify that any of this stuff is actually legit before you hire me.
Yeah.
But what I'm struck by is how often people hire based on that impulse, or that sense of, well, this guy must be an expert because he sounds. And so I tell my kids, I'm like, to be successful in consulting, you have to know more than the person you're talking to.
Yep.
And you have to speak with enough confidence that the person thinks, oh my God, this guy is really an expert.
Yep.
I could be describing the back of a milk container. But if I can say it to you, like, the glucamate in this is really.
Yeah, it's good glucamate.
You don't know what glucamate is. You're like, I don't even know what that is.
It sure sounds like you do.
He does. So I'm going to hire this guy.
And my buddy has a glucamate problem. He's out in Maryland. You got to talk to him.
It's amazing that we were just talking about glucamate just recently. So anyway, in terms of the land banking space, it's one of those it's one of those terms or concepts that people think they have an idea of what it means, or they've heard about it, or they've heard good things about it, and they start down the path and they realize, I don't really know what this actually means.
Yeah.
And now I'm committed to a strategy, or I'm committed to something. And on the other hand, and I don't know if this is getting too deep into like the...
No, this is great. Let me double check the record button. Keep going. We good?
But the other thing that happens not infrequently, and this was also part of this call that I just came from, was there are people who are experienced in private real estate development. Mm-hmm. And their knowledge about how this stuff works is completely different from the people who work in government.
Right.
And so oftentimes where we end up is this position of being like this interlocutor between the private sector person who says, this is how I do things, and the public sector person who says, well, you can't do it that way because that violates all of these different rules, blah, blah. And trying to get both sides to recognize, like, you need to change how you're doing what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the way you do it, that's not going to work that works in the private when no one can see what you're doing.
Sure. This
is public, and everybody can see what you're doing, and that's not going to fly. That thing you're used to doing, that's not going to fly. And on the other side, for the public, it's saying you need to relax a little bit. Your rules, your restrictions, the reason why you're not having success is because you made it impossible for this guy to actually do what he does. So let's both, let's temper expectations. You polish up your rough edges a little bit. We can make this work. And that was my experience at Cook County, was sitting down with these guys that were, you're from Chicago, Chicago. There's neighborhoods in Chicago where not many people are doing development work in those neighborhoods because they're tough neighborhoods to work. The numbers don't work. You do have to have some rough edges and so forth. And so these were the guys that were coming into our offices talking about they wanted to do projects. And I would ask them, tell me what you want to do. And they would describe it. And I would think, does this person sound like they know what they're talking about? Do they have a clear idea of what they're trying to do?
Sure.
Is there a strategy? Any alarm bells going off with this person? And I would tell them, because then they would ask, what are the rules for getting properties from the land bank? And I'd say, well, we're still working on the rules, but I'll tell you how I operate. I will help you get a property. I'll help you get some property. And I'll let you, demonstrate you know what you're doing and can succeed. If you're successful, I'll get you more properties. If you're not successful, I won't get you any more properties, and we'll never do business together ever again. Huh. How does that sound as the rule? And people are like, that's it. I said, pretty much. I mean, we'll write it on paper.
Yeah.
But really what it comes down to is I need you to prove to me that you can be trusted to succeed.
Yeah.
And if you're successful, I will open the spigot and I will feed you properties until you whatever. So I was there for about a year. That was the kind of the principle that I established. And the people that came after me took that same principle and just went crazy with it. Mm-hmm. To the extent that there are people who are probably millionaires, people who have made millions of dollars buying and flipping properties out of the land bank. People you've never heard of. People who, if they were walking down the street, you have no idea. That's one of the most successful flippers in Englewood. Why? Because we're not in Englewood. We don't spend any time in Englewood.
Right.
That guy's in Englewood every single day. Yeah. And he has it, So that was really an interesting experience for me at Cook County, because you got a chance to work with these people that, at least in my background, I had never interacted with. I didn't do that kind of development work. I came from a community development background, which was LIHTC and affordable housing and big subsidies. And here are these guys that are using hard money, which I didn't even know what that term meant. Yeah. It's like, what is that term? Oh, that's where your rich guy loans you money at 10% and says, if you don't pay it, I'm going to come take your car or your knees or whatever it is. But that whole world was just so different for me, and it was really interesting to get that exposure.
So if someone paratrooped into that conversation, which they kind of have, I want to take us back to a second, because it almost sounds like there was a moment where you controlled all the inner city properties from Cook County. So let me say this differently. If I were to say, what industry, how do you describe the industry that you're in? So it's niche real estate. From what I know of you, it's about community revitalization. I threw out the term land bank
Yep.
because that was a new term for me.
Yep.
But if someone was to say, okay, Brian, what's the industry is your organization?
Yeah.
And then how did you get there?
Yeah. So I would describe the work that we're in as we're involved in community revitalization.
Okay.
So it's community development,
Yep.
which depending on where you're coming from, community development is CDBG, it's grants, it's assistance for people who are low income, or food programs. It's that's a lot of community development work. It's
Gotcha.
developing a community, which includes brick and mortar, but it's also human capital development.
Got it.
Broadly stated. Then you have economic development, which people generally think of in terms of commercial downtown redevelopment or transit-oriented development, where they're mixed. We're building a big project. We have a train station. We have a bunch of residences. We have some stores. We have some retail. It's all mixed together. That's an economic development project. And so community revitalization, I would describe it as you're working in areas where there's been a distressed market or distressed neighborhood.
Yep.
Industry has left or has transformed. Maybe the housing stock in that particular area was built for a particular need that's no longer relevant. It's obsolete. And now you got the municipality or the county, their jurisdiction, trying to figure out what are we going to do with this. We got people living here. We've got vacant land. We've got slack. We're not collecting taxes from this property, or not enough taxes. So things are kind of out of whack. And what community revitalization really is about doing is coming in and kind of putting, kind of making lemonade out of lemons.
Yep.
Okay. And that's maybe, I don't know, it's a term that
I know what you mean.
But it's basically saying that I use these sort of metaphors, which may or may not be appropriate, but I talk about it's the island of misfit toys.
Yeah.
You got all these misfit toys that someone put into this place of it's a mess.
Yep.
Well, if you familiar with the Christmas movie that I'm describing, the Island of Misfit Toys, there's heroes. Yep. There's essential characters that have to actually be, they're critical for the plot.
Right.
Like they have to be there for the thing to be resolved successfully. So to me, putting a community together is sort of similar in that sense. You're like, okay, we got all these different mismatched pieces that maybe they're here because they have to be. People who could have left have left. Industries that could have left have left. But some people are still here, and they make the anchors that we're going to build around. And then we have these physical assets of the land and property, and some of those are properties that are actually usable. So there's some what I would describe as intrinsic value.
Yep.
And some of those are properties that really need a lot of work to bring out the value. So I would say for what for community revitalization, it's being able to walk into a situation and assess, what are we dealing with? What are you trying to accomplish? And what are the pieces we have available to us to accomplish that? I have to be able to understand enough about all those different pieces to be able to provide guidance or assistance to somebody.
Yep.
I don't need to know how to fix all of those problems. I just need to know that there is a problem, that there is a solution, and I can marry them together. So at a high level, when someone says, what do you do? I would tell them, well, I run a small software company that assists cities and counties with community revitalization. If they're still interested, then I will talk further. They might say, what is community revitalization? And I can say, well, it's helping distressed communities kind of put the pieces back together and make them functional. Oh, that sounds interesting. It is. It can be.
Let's talk a little bit about the software, because that's it's like a core, right? And the consulting is actually, that'll end up being a question I have is.
It's interesting. So when you asked earlier how I got involved in it. So I got involved in it. I got involved in the land bank. This is actually kind of funny. So my background is in affordable housing and community development, grassroots, most of my career. I got a job working at Charter One Bank. Okay. Here right downtown. My office was actually right across the street here. I can't tell where I am. It's one of these buildings on Wacker. And it was the first corporate job I'd ever had, where I had to put on a tie and come to an office, and it's a bank.
I did it too.
You worked in that space, so what it's like. There's no, casual Friday means you can take your jacket off when you're at the office. So that was a completely different experience for me. And the reason I was hired for that job was the bank needed somebody to put together a community redevelopment strategy for the bank to guide its investments, its community investment strategy. there was nobody doing that. So they needed someone to do that. And I think I was recommended for the job by someone who had worked at the bank, and they interviewed me, and I guess I interviewed well, and they hired me. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I can't believe these guys hired me. And this is like, I come to work and I sit in a cubicle wearing a suit for the first time in my life, and people are actually listening to me about community reinvestment. So that lasted for about a year, and I would still be with the bank probably today, except that my nephew, who's in commercial real estate, contacted me one day and said, I got contacted about this job. It sounded horrible, but then I thought, you might like it. It was the land bank. So I interviewed for that job, and I got that job because they said, we hired you because you had community development experience, but you also had a corporate background. We thought your corporate experience would be really helpful in dealing with...
The cube paid off.
And I sort of laughed. I was like, you hired me because you thought I had corporate experience. Yeah. Like, I'm not a corporate person at all. So that lasted for about a year, and I got hired by this company, because they said, we have this software product, we're trying to sell it to people. None of them really understand how to use it. When you were at the land bank and you guys bought it, you immediately understood how to use it, and you started using it like right out of the gate. And we realized, this guy gets it. Will you come work for us? Okay. So I went to work for this company, and I started out working with a company around the software, really helping people understand, how do you position this particular piece of software to achieve this community revitalization strategy? And that's been 13 years.
Wow.
I'm going on 13 years. Is that right? 12, 20, 11 years? Something. I don't know. Yeah. It seems like it's been forever. But so the software is still a really important part of our business. But what we realized about, 6 or 7 years ago was, we can't successfully sell the product to anybody if they don't know what they're doing.
Sure.
And a lot of them don't, because this topic is so convoluted that you end up in a situation where someone is running a land bank or starts a land bank, really has no idea what that means. Right. And then they get into it and they're like, oh, this isn't grants management, which is what I'm used to, or this isn't nonprofit LIHTC deals, because none of these projects are like that type of project. So you end up in a situation where a lot of people are in the land banking space working at land banks, who are not unlike myself when I was at Cook County, who really don't know what that means. And they're learning on the fly. So we started to introduce the consulting to say, let us help you, let us guide you, let us give you some suggestions about how you can strategically utilize the software. And so the consulting work actually has grown, where on a revenue standpoint, it's still a relatively small part of our business, because most of our business is from the recurring revenue of the software. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that the consulting is the most important part of our business.
Sure.
Because no one can actually utilize the tool if they don't have a strategy, and the strategy doesn't come if they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing or how to do it. And so we spend a lot of time where we're like, before you buy the software, can we spend some time talking about your strategy? Because I don't think your strategy is going to work, and here's why. Or I think you've positioned yourself in a way that the community at large, however you describe it, is going to be very disappointed, because you set expectation. I don't mean you as a personal, but I mean the expectations have been set, and I think realistically it's going to be much different from what you expected. So we can help you understand how to sort of bring the expectations down, and focus your energies on what is probably the most likely going to result in tangible results, but it's not necessarily what you think it is today.
Yeah.
And that's a compelling argument for a lot of people, because a lot of them are like, I don't know what I'm doing.
So I got a question. So, and part of what you said is, there's some people that are clients that they don't really understand what a land bank is. I'd love to just get kind of a quick definition of what a land bank is, because I think probably a lot of people might not know that. And then what the software is doing. Yeah. And so
you're gonna let me do my sales pitch?
Yeah, I mean, so what's a land bank?
So a land bank is essentially, it's typically either a quasi-governmental or a nonprofit organization that is set up by a government with the specific intent of acquiring distressed assets, real estate assets, and putting them to some kind of productive reuse. Now that's a very kind of esoteric explanation, but the reality is most of the cities and counties that have land banks have significant inventories of distressed real estate. That's property that's tax delinquent. It might be environmentally contaminated. In the southern part of the United States, we have huge problems with clouded title, which is where title was never recorded because the families didn't trust their county recorder, or they didn't know that that's what you did, or they didn't want to pay the expense of having it recorded, so they saved the money on the fee. But now the title has never been recorded, so we don't actually legally know who owns this property.
Interesting.
So when you get into situations where you're trying to transact that real estate and put it together for some constructive reuse, you encounter these issues of unpaid taxes, environmental contamination, which may belong, maybe the responsibility of the prior owner.
Yep.
That owner has left the picture. We got to figure out how to assign the responsibility and the cost of cleanup to that person, because if I'm buying that property, I could inherit that problem. Now it becomes my legal responsibility. The heir properties are problematic because you don't know who the heirs are. You have to give the people the opportunity to step forward.
Right.
Well, there's a process for doing that, which most people are not familiar with.
It's like unclaimed property almost.
It's on. Yeah. And have you ever tried to claim unclaimed property from the state of Illinois as an example?
Yeah.
It requires like 10 forms. You have to give them your birth certificate and your mother's maiden name and the blood of your firstborn child, all of that to get your $134.48 the state is holding, right? I mean, it's a very complicated process.
Although, you should try it again. It's way easier now. They've automated a lot.
Well, it is, but it's still, we were dealing with this. We had a family member that had passed away, and we were dealing with an estate issue. And
oh, sure, okay. Yeah.
Maybe it's not 10 forms, but there still are several forms. And it takes, so land banks are typically positioned as what I would describe then as like the intermediate step between distressed and productive reuse. So you're identifying these parcels, you're figuring out what the intervention is to get them ready to be sold for reuse, and then you're conveying them to somebody typically to reuse them. So depending on which type of organization, which entity you're describing, again, it's either governmental or nonprofit, it's almost always focused on distressed properties. And historically, they were acquiring properties for temporary use and conveying them out. Now what we're seeing, because of the changing dynamics of the real estate markets where these groups are located, there's a certain part where in community development, your objective is to put yourself out of business.
Sure.
If I solve all the world's problems, there's no need for community development organizations.
Interesting.
Well, land banks, if you're dealing with distressed assets and your focus is resolving the distressed asset problem, if you're successful, there's no need for you because you're formed to deal with distressed assets. There are no more distressed assets.
Sure.
So coming out of the recession back in 08, 09,
I say we're talking about 09.
we had gazillion properties. We had foreclosed properties all over the place. And when people go into foreclosure, they stop paying the taxes. So we got tax delinquent property. So the pipeline, so to speak, was massive. Well, as the economy is improving, pipeline's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you have all these structures that were put in place post-recession that are no longer needed. The same thing happens with tax delinquent property. Cook County is an outlier because it has so much tax delinquent property. It's probably 30,000 parcels as of today. It was 25,000 when I was there 10, 12 years ago or whatever. So the numbers just keep going because the changes that are happening in the community and how the taxes are collected and all sorts of reasons. But in a lot of places, the inventories went from several hundred properties that were available to a handful.
Okay.
You can't run an organization on a handful of properties. So land banks had to reinvent themselves. Now you see land banks that are doing new construction, infill development. They're experimenting with modular construction, 3D printing. There's all this really esoteric stuff that's being done where land banks are being utilized as kind of the experimenters.
And again, a land bank is an organization that owns a group of properties that are, the situation is a lemon, not the people in the community, whatever, but like, how do I make this better?
And they're working in, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And they're working in neighborhoods where there may not be intrinsic market demand for property.
Sure.
There may be properties that you could develop, but you require deep subsidies. So if you think about a situation like 3D printing of buildings,
Yeah.
This is a hot topic, right? 3D,
Yep.
3D technologies.
I'm saying yes, but I did not know that. That's very cool.
It is. It's
I know
really
3D printing.
I mean, it's really 3D
buildings,
printing.
yeah.
If you there's a company called Icon that does these 3D printing where they can build a. I just saw a video of it yesterday that was 20 up to 27 feet tall, and they can build they have a 70-foot gantry crane thing that pumps the 3D concrete.
Wow.
So you can imagine if you're building a structure and you've got 70 feet of reach, that's a pretty, it's a pretty good sized building you could build, 27 feet high. Now you're like, okay, I could build with a 3D printer an entire, a 3-story office building or a commercial retail center or a community center, who knows what. So even with the technology, that's still prohibitively expensive.
Sure.
Right? And from being in the entrepreneur space, you got all these companies that are like, we have this great concept, and the local government or the state government, the county government says, we don't do entrepreneurship. We don't do beta testing.
Yeah.
We buy products that we know that are tested.
We got taxpayers to report to. We can't talk about all these risks we're taking.
So if you're Icon and you've got this great technology and you want to show people, where do you go? You go to a land bank because they'll take anything.
Interesting.
They're like, come bring your ideas to us because we got lots of land. It still needs to be subsidized, but we'll subsidize 1 or 2 proof of concept projects to demonstrate it. So you can create a win-win between the entrepreneurial sector that's like, I got this cool idea, I need some place to test it, and a land bank who says, well, we got these properties that we really don't know what to do with. If you want to come test it over here, we'll let you.
Interesting.
And once you have established the proof of concept, then all of a sudden you could say, well, now we can have you go and apply to conventional government entity to build your project because you've actually demonstrated. So I've seen the same thing happening with tiny homes, modular construction, manufactured housing is moving into the space where people are trying to figure out how to solve the vacant land problem economically. And a lot of where they're doing that is by harnessing kind of the entrepreneurial spirit of these startup companies and saying, let's try to bridge the difference or the gap between what you can do in a completely conventional vacant land out in the middle of some suburbia and my little infill site that's between 2 structures here in Englewood or Auburn Gresham. So I think, if you look at land banking, writ large, I think what's really interesting is that sense of it being like this laboratory of experimentation in community development. Yeah. It's still really expensive. It still costs a lot of subsidy to make it happen. But, I use the modular construction as an example, is like, if you were wanting to build a 1,200 square foot house in a factory and bring it to a site in Chicago and install it, there's so much logistical hassle you have to go through to make it work. Mm-hmm. So that first unit you build is going to be really expensive because it's the first one you did. Ideally, by the time you get to the 500th or the 1,000th, you've figured out the system.
Commercialized it,
and you've commercialized it to the point where now you can actually deliver them at a much more affordable price point. The other part is you have to be willing to go out and buy 500 units from the factory to justify them changing their production line to suit your specific 1,200 square foot model. Right. So I look at this as like, I sort of feel like I'm witnessing or participating in the evolution of not just land banking, but
building innovation.
Innovation more broadly speaking, where land banks are the place where that experimentation happens. Yep. And that is really exciting, but it doesn't happen enough, and it doesn't. I still spend most of my time dealing with software. Right. Now, you asked me the question about the software.
So what does the software do?
So
how does it make that?
So the software, this is the sales pitch, and this is actually, I think, is a good way of understanding it. If you think about the trajectory of a distressed piece of property, you have its current or historic situation, which is whatever caused it to get into distress. Mm-hmm. You have an intermediate stage where it's being stabilized, and then you have the marketing and sale out the door, right? So what our software does is it helps people organize all the information that is kind of incidental to that process. So you can identify all the parcels you might want to acquire and map them out and figure out what you're going to do with them and start triaging them into some kind of buckets. Then as you start to stabilize, stabilization can be things like clearing the title, clearing the structure, doing environmental remediation, rehabbing it, even securing it by boarding it. So those are all activities that somebody has to be responsible for. So there's a work order, task management aspect to the software. There is a website that's built in so you can market your property. So one of the things that we would argue for our clients is we'd say the minute you get a property coming in, you want to start marketing it, because the private person out in the world, whether it's a Habitat for Humanity or you or whoever, they need to see that property and start thinking about what they would do with it, because that sort of germination of their thought process, the quicker you can get that started, the quicker you're going to be able to strike a deal when you're ready to sell it. So you've identified the property, you're stabilizing it. As soon as you start stabilizing it, you want to start marketing it so you can line up your capital and your redevelopment plan.
So I acquire this distressed building that's full of asbestos, but boy, would it make a great casino.
Right. I got to remove the asbestos. I got to develop the architectural drawings for my casino. I've got to line up my capital and my investors who are going to invest in this idea. And I can't do a lot of that lining up the investment if I don't have site control. So if you're the investor on the outside, you're looking for a large structure. I'm the land bank, and I've acquired a piece of property that might actually suit your purposes, but it has a lot of hair on it. Now we're going to work together where if I clear the hair off the property and sell it to you, you'll do your deal, your project.
And this is all happening within your software. So you've got a two-sided marketplace going on, essentially? That is interesting. Okay.
And so what we're trying to do with the software is we try to help the organization. And the other part that's kind of difficult about this with the software is that each jurisdiction has its own rules, its own requirements, its own dependencies. It answers to specific constituencies. That in Chicago, they may be one set of groups you have to respond to, but in Syracuse, it's somebody completely different, and the rules are different. So what has been really challenging is that the software is designed as a commercial off-the-shelf solution that can be customized by each person to make it almost like a custom build piece of software. Really, if you're in software, it's really cool.
For sure.
If you're not in software, you're like,
what did I buy?
I just want you to fix this. So a lot of what we spend our time doing is helping people understand, first of all, what is your strategy of moving the property from point A to point B to point C to point D? Once we understand that, then we can configure the software to support all of that. Now, the challenge that comes in is you as the user have to stick to using it the way you said you were going to use it. And of course they don't. They stop using it, or they go back to their old habits, or they, you got a lot of people who work in the land bank space who are not technical people. And so that presents a lot of challenges where you can build this really cool system for someone who's not really able to use it or is not really interested in using it. And now what do you do? So
launch a service business.
Well, you launch a service business, or what we've spent a lot of time doing over the last, 5 or 6 years is we've been reorienting and just kind of re-engineering the software to try to make it as simple to use and as kind of dummy proof as you can, recognizing that people still need to have the flexibility. And, the interesting thing that I see happen all the time with the software is people abandon whatever system they put in place. And it doesn't have to be just the software. It could be any system they put in place, any process they put in place. They abandon it for expediency or for efficiency or because they're just not comfortable with doing it and they just would prefer not to. It could be, having your camera on during team meetings. Companies have this requirement. You have to have your camera on during team meetings. Someone says, well, I don't want to put my camera on during team meetings because my house is messy. All right, well, we're going to let you turn off your camera. Now I can't see what you're doing during the team meeting. So I've accommodated my process to your, So there's all this happen. This happens all the time in our work. And then what happens to that organization is someone comes along and says, hey, I want to ask you about ABC on this property that you acquired 3 years ago. Lo and behold, you weren't tracking the information they're asking you about because you stopped
using the software.
You stopped using the software. You stopped tracking it. Now you don't know. So what's interesting is as many times as I've had these conversations with people, I try to explain to them the reason why we want you to use the software the way you designed it, the way you customize it, is because it's a risk management strategy. It's going to protect you in that situation that comes up when someone asks you a question and you can't answer.
Yeah.
And one of the big difference between public sector and private sector is if you are private sector and you screw something up, no one knows. You're not going to appear on the front page of the Chicago Tribune.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
When you're the guy who runs the land bank and you screw up, you're going to be on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah.
And even if your explanation as to why the mistake happened or why you lost track of something or whatever, even if your explanation is completely serviceable and normal and anodyne, you're still on the front page of the newspaper.
Right.
Everybody is now in your business. All of your work stops because you have to do crisis management over the story in the newspaper. Now you go from the newspaper story, which you resolved. Now it's 3 months down the road and you're talking in a community meeting. Someone sees you're coming to the community meeting, they Google you. What do they find?
The newspaper story.
The newspaper story. Now that thing trails with you like a piece of dirty toilet paper attached to your shoe.
Right.
So I explain to people, I'm like, the reason why you want to use the software to manage this is because you are working in the public space and you want to avoid, and as many times as I've said it to people, and you can follow my illustration, right? You know,
oh, yeah.
You know exactly what that's going to end up, the bad news that happens, right?
Absolutely.
As often as I've explained that to people, time and again, they stop using the software. I had a client who came to me one time and said, I'm having a difficult time finding some information in the system. I said, okay, let's go take a look and see what's the issue. Well, the issue was that the person working at the organization had not been updating any of the information that they were supposed to be. And the other person wasn't aware of it because they weren't in the software. So the client says, well, what do I do? I don't know. Do you still have the information someplace? So a lot of what we spend our time doing is coaching and cajoling and encouraging and trying to model best practices and so forth, even while we're spending time doing this really fun stuff around these projects and strategies and how ideas and so forth. And so the software is really important, but I feel like what I've learned in the 12 years, whatever it's been, is that the software is only as important as the strategy that's behind it and the willingness of the folks to actually stick to the strategy. And if there is no strategy, or if the strategy doesn't make any sense, or if there's not discipline to stick to the system that you put in place, the whole thing just falls apart really quickly. And I don't have a solution for it. It's one of my enduring frustrations, is that I look at it like, I don't know how to solve. I can't solve the problem of your staff person doesn't do their job and you don't monitor what they're doing, so you don't know they're not doing it. I don't have a solution for that. That's a you problem. Yeah. But it happens all the time.
Interesting. And it could be an opportunity, right? That could be. Was it?
Yeah, I mean, there was somebody suggested to us at one point, like, that we could be like the administrators of all these different entities as far as the software is concerned. So you're a staff person, you have a data update you need, or you need a process through the software, you just come and ask us and we spit it out for you.
Yeah.
And we sort of explored it and we said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because all we're doing is enabling them to basically practice bad staff management.
Sure.
Now they blame me that the data's not updated, the data's not there. I don't want to, that's not the solution is you have to take responsibility to run the organization effectively and professionally. And if you screw up and you make a mistake or whatever, so be it.
Yeah.
We deal with it. But we're not going to internalize that responsibility because you just don't want to.
Well, and that's the nice thing about having a business is you can choose what type of business you want to be in.
Right.
So I'm sure that's something that your team could figure out. But now you have to figure out how to manage a business that is essentially data entry on top of a software company, on top of a consulting company.
And you're doing it, and the data entry is really is people management.
Right.
It's like the I'm trying to think of an illustration, but it's like in the space of code enforcement. Mm-hmm. there's all these building inspectors who go out and inspect properties for code violations. And most of that today is done with technology. You have a tablet or an iPhone, a cell phone app that you use
Sure.
to do your intake. But some of it for smaller communities, rural communities with lower resources, lower capacities, they're still doing it on pen and paper. So a guy comes out to the property, he's got a aluminum clipboard box, he opens it up, he's got a form, he fills it out, takes his pictures with his digital camera, goes back to the office. Now he has to data input all that information. He's got to transfer his photos. So much time and effort is being spent
Sure.
by that person to do that task, whereas the technology could solve it much, much more efficiently. But the issue is that guy, that woman, is not comfortable with technology.
Sure.
No matter what you do, they're going to keep going back to pen and paper. And so the dilemma for the organization is you could say, well, we have to replace you because we really need someone who's more technically comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, you're sacrificing potentially 20, 30 years of technical knowledge the person has about doing inspections.
The job that they're doing, the inspections.
So you don't.
Yeah.
You keep putting up with it.
Huh.
On paper. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with all the time, is that tension between the technical solution, and sort of like I joke, like if you just do it the way I tell you to do it, it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
But of course, that's for me, not perfect for you. And so it's really, I think as a company, what we have to also do is we have to learn, I think we just have to learn more as a company about how to be a good partner to our clients and meet them where they are and help them get where they're trying to go, but not prescribe where they should go, and be okay saying like, yeah, well, that was a bad decision you made, or that was a bad decision we made together.
Yeah.
Life goes on,
So this is interesting. Hearing all of this, and some of this I knew just from knowing you, different aspects of your business. But I think for someone listening in, it sounds like there's a part of this is all government and regulation and confusing, and somebody somewhere knows those rules and they're making all the money and that type of stuff. But then we talk on, or you were talking on, all the innovation that's happening, right? And we started the conversation from somebody sounding like they're flipping properties that no one else knows about and everything else.
Right.
It sounds interesting. How, for someone who would want to get interested in this facet of real estate, what are some things you might recommend in terms of getting started? So
if you wanted to get involved in acquiring sort of these properties and
being somewhere in the ecosystem, where's the fun part to be?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on what
you're involved.
Yeah, it depends on what your interests are. I mean, I think if for technologists, people I would describe as technologists, I think the modular, manufactured, factory-built technology there's huge opportunity to continue to kind of refine the mousetrap for how do you build, right?
What are the big problems right now that solve? Is it purely
the biggest
house?
The biggest problem is it's cost.
Okay.
And
what's the biggest problem?
And I would say for the sake of, since I have the camera, the biggest problem is we don't pay people enough.
Sure.
Wages is the biggest problem. So when we talk about housing,
so incentives. Yeah.
Well, no, it's literally, if you think about housing, what people will purchase is what they can afford.
Oh, sure. Oh, gotcha.
Right?
I see.
So we're always trying to solve the problem by how can we build it more cheaply to bring the cost to the consumer down.
Correct.
Right? So if we can use 3D printing or manufactured housing or modular construction, we can shave costs by shortening the development time or the production time or whatever. I'm always like, are we ever going to talk about raising the purchasing power of the consumer?
Right.
Because if everyone had more money to spend on housing, what housing costs would become far less of a concern.
Yep.
So I feel like what I'm witnessing, and I've been in community development for 25 years, and so I feel like what I'm witnessing is a recognition that we can only shave so much money out of the production costs. We're still at the point where, if I'm building a house that costs $400,000 to build,
yeah,
and I need to sell it to somebody who's going to only be able to pay $250,000,
yeah,
it's $150,000 gap.
Right.
So if I can bring the cost down, by 10% on my production cost. Now I'm at $360,000.
Yeah.
Still $110,000 off. At some point, I got to bring the consumer power to say, hey, you can afford a $275,000 or $300,000 or $325,000 house. How? Because I'm going to cover some of the cost of your health insurance. I'm going to deal with your student loan payments that are saddling you with debt that you can't get out from under.
Right.
I'm going to get you a better, cheaper credit card so you can finance your lifestyle and not pay 19, 20% interest.
Yeah.
So there's all these, and this is not what I do.
Sure.
But if somebody were getting into this space, I would say focus your attention on how you can get people more money, because that's a huge part of it. On the other side, I do think the technology piece is really interesting. So coming up with ways to manufacture the house, redesign the house or the structure in a way that's more efficient. Mm-hmm. If I look at this space, for example, we have these curving hallways. Right? That creates all these odd shaped rooms. I don't know, but I would argue that's probably not the most efficient use of the space because of all the odd shapes, but it's really cool. So if you're thinking about building a new structure, 20 years ago, people didn't live in tiny houses. That was like, no one wanted to do that. We didn't have accessory dwelling units, backyard cottages, all that. That's become now a thing. So I think there's going to be continuing evolution in the direction of, again, 3D printing, modular construction, redesigning how people live so that people can live in a more compact, efficient. There's all the stuff around climate change. Sure. So, as we're doing projects where someone's looking at building a house, and again, I use these round numbers, but let's say it costs $200,000 to build a house in Chicago, or $250,000. Now go to someplace in a high climate risk area in the southeast where you have to build at hurricane force, right? Or in an area where you say, I can't build with a basement like we have in Chicago because we don't have soils that can have basements. So everything's built on slab. All right, well, where am I going to store my stuff? I got to come up with a different way of storing all my possessions. So the way we design houses in Chicago versus Louisiana is different. Now you factor in climate change, and all of a sudden that house that you were going to build in Louisiana just got that much more expensive because now it has to be built to withstand a Category 5 storm. Or it has to be elevated above the ground because we have to be able to have room for water to come in. So there's all these technical challenges in terms of housing construction that I think are going to be continuing. They're really going to be interesting problems to solve. And I think for folks...
Florida's going to solve the problem different than Chicago is, different than California is.
Florida's got a huge problem because Florida is built on soft soils and swampy soils. And it's a state that is attracting huge numbers of people, which means you need more density, which means you're building up, which puts a lot of pressure down in an area where it's really not designed for that. Yeah. And the rising seas means all that coastal land in Florida is going to be flooded. Seriously. And I don't think policymakers are really, they're not saying like we can't build on the coastal plains of Florida any longer. No one's saying that. So someone will have to come up with a way of solving from a technical standpoint, how do you build in climate, high climate risk areas when people want these sorts of choices that they are used to. I tell my kids who are, again, they're 22 and 24. I'm like, if I were getting started today, I would be doing engineering, I'd be doing chemistry or something involved in chemical process of how you make new materials and new research, because moving from the sort of stick-built world of the 1950s to whatever is going to be the 2050s, it's a huge technological transformation that's coming or that's happening. I'm too old to take advantage of it, but if you're 20 or 22, you're on the ground floor, follow it. Wind, solar, energy, all of these things are all related to community development, but they're not what people think about. And I'm not sure if this is something that somebody who's interested in flipping houses, but I might say to them, rather than think about flipping houses, why don't you think about manufacturing a massive battery storage facility in a neighborhood so that you can have a bunch of solar, store the energy for nighttime, and then power the homes at night. That's a huge problem everyone talks about.
Yeah.
Where we're going to store, how are we going to have solar when we have, night or cloudy days? And I'm like, well, if you look at the technologies, there's really interesting technologies being done around battery storage and massive commercial scale battery. How do you apply that at a residential level?
Sure.
How do you put
You test it on the land bank first, and then.
So maybe the land bank has a vacant lot that they repurpose and they put in a huge battery bank on that lot. And now that battery bank plugs into 15 houses in the neighborhood who can get cheap energy, which brings down their housing costs. So that kind of thinking, our world requires people to connect the dots that way. And then they require people to say, you know what, I'm not going to try to be a flipper. I'm going to build the battery. It's not as sexy,
right? But
it's really critically important to make
this whole
block sustainable. I need to have local energy, and that's what people are. Those are the problems that people are trying to solve, and I find those problems to be really fascinating.
Very interesting. So, and what it's kind of getting into as well is the idea of, I can't remember if this is part of your bio or part of the description of your organization, but the phrase social entrepreneur was in there. And I wanted to ask you what that meant, but I think I just heard it.
I personally am fascinated by how do you build social goods producing enterprises in a capitalist world. Like I tell people, we operate in a market-based world. If you want to build this thing, you have to be able to pay for it, or someone has to pay for it. It's, there's a balance sheet aspect to this, which is like, you may not pay for it. That means I'm paying for it. The dollar never goes away. It just moves from one balance sheet to the other. So what I find really interesting about some of these concepts is you're saying, I want to produce a social good, which is a place for people to live, or a stable neighborhood, or a compact urban design neighborhood where people can walk around and don't need to have cars. What do I need to do to facilitate that type of a lifestyle or that type of a community? And there's all these pieces that are required that we don't really have ready-made. So we're doing pilot projects and we're testing these things and so forth. And I feel like, if we were sitting here 20 years from now, this concept of a neighborhood battery storage block, every neighborhood would have one.
Right.
It wouldn't even be a thing. Every neighborhood would be built with solar on the roof. It would be a thing. You build a house, you don't put shingles on the roof.
That's how we do it.
You put solar panels. You put small wind turbines that are, the size of this table, not a 250-foot.
Right.
Every house has a little turbine, and they're not the kind of turbines that are fans. They're oscillating or whatever. We're going to invent those technologies, and they're going to become ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And whoever owns the company that built it is going to do great because they're going to sell a shit ton of turbines. But somebody has to invent it. Somebody has to commercialize it. Somebody has to make it scalable.
Exactly.
And I feel like where we are right now,
because all of that exists, all those things.
They all exist, but they're all in that startups. Or a lot of them are in that startup phase, or they're in the phase of I'm going to test it out, and then I'm going to fail. I'm going to go bankrupt, and someone's going to come in after me and pick up my pieces and figure out, oh, this is where you made your mistake, and I'm going to improve upon it. And I'm going to improve upon it, iterate it. So, so that's the kind of stuff that fascinates me, and I think the social entrepreneurship is. I think of entrepreneurship as you're creating something that's sellable. Yeah. And the social part should be that for me, it always has to be something that people actually need.
Of course.
I'm not interested in creating something just to make money.
Right.
That's probably one of my failings as a business person is that I don't have that mindset. I wish I did.
Well, since you have a responsible person helping manage a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, and if you're a small, we're such a small company that if I'm spending my time thinking about these sort of, windmills in the sky, I'm not paying the bills.
Right.
And I have to balance, I got to be able to pay the bills, and then that buys me time to go do these other things. So what we've been trying to do as a company is continue to evolve the company, the software product, to make the software product as useful as it can be for the audience that we're working with, and expand it to make it more useful for other audiences, so you can sell more units and so forth. But at the same time, shift towards maybe what is more, maybe it's my strengths, or, which is the strategy piece and the thought piece, where you're saying to somebody, I think I know what you're trying to solve, but I think I can help you go about it a different way.
Right.
And I will tell people, you may not buy software from us. You may be a land bank. You may never buy software from us. I think you can still benefit from working with us. I think we can still bring value to what you're trying to accomplish. Let's explore that. And if we're successful, then we find something that's mutually beneficial and we can create something new. That's the entrepreneurship piece. But again, it always has to be, it comes back for me, like, you have to be addressing something that people need. I get really frustrated by, technology for technology's sake.
Sure.
I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but a lot of companies create technology that's really cool for the technology company.
Right.
It doesn't really serve something that I need.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like if we're not actually able to provide something that people really can benefit from and need, then we shouldn't do it. We should go do something else. And I feel that way about our company, where, again, we're small enough as a company that if I decided as the company owner tomorrow, I don't want to do this anymore, I could close up my shop pretty quickly. I mean, we're small enough that we can do that. So I feel like every day I have to feel like there's something compelling me beyond simply paying the bills that gets me to keep coming in and doing the stuff that I'm doing. And sometimes I have days where I'm like, boy, closing up shop seems really attractive right now. I'm sick and tired of all this. But it's just, I think the land bank space, because of the space we're in, it's such a small space. It's such a niche space. It's really struggled the last couple of years because of all the turbulence in the broader marketplace. That it's also forced us to figure out, like, if we are going to have jobs here, what are we going to be doing? It's not just the software, because we're not sure that's going to be, if you're doing an inventory management solution and there's no inventory.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting here too, because the space I work in is largely technology, right? Design and technology, really.
Yeah.
But it is innovating. Past 20 minutes, it just changed. And so there's always a grass is greener. Like, hey, my brother builds houses. It's like, oh man, it must be nice just to build a house. What you help me remind is the whole world is innovating and changing, right? And getting into these same sort of conversations about, some of the shifts that happened either because of market conditions and then also, global climate. My world of that is also market conditions, just different markets, and then your disruptive technology such as AI and everything else, and then also just how careers and jobs are shifting it impacts my world too, in terms of who's making decisions. It's very interesting to hear kind of the system-wide way that you kind of look at the space that you're working on. It'd be pretty easy. We used the word flipping houses earlier. I think I used the word. Yeah. And I think when you first hear that, you think of, somebody bought low, threw a couple dollars in, sold it high, they're driving a fancy car now and all this other stuff. But it's not how you talk about, because it's not what's happening with the work that you're involved in. It's improvement. We're not necessarily trying to do the quick buck. Well,
it could be both. I mean, it could be both. Ideally, it's both. It's you got to. And I always
to make money to be.
Well, what I mean is, I tell our clients that are the land bank clients, I'm like, almost all the land bank clients that I work with are people that I'm familiar with in the space. They all have a habitat that they work with who builds a house every year. That's a habitat builds a house every year. That's what they do.
Yep.
So if you're in a community where
specifically Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, Habitat for Okay. So as an example, they're a great partner for our land banks because they'll take the vacant land and they'll build a house, and they have a financing model that works for them because of the use of sweat equity and other reasons.
Yep.
They're building one house.
Right.
A really high capacity one is building 5 houses. A huge, like, unicorn habitat is building, more than that. But most of them are building 1 to 2 or 3 houses a year. And that's about what they can manage. So you need the flippers. Right? They're going to bring the volume of activity. So a lot of what you're doing with the flippers is you're guiding them towards a socially beneficial outcome. And many of the flippers, they're going to make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. They might get really strike it, be really successful and make 70 or 80, but they're not making millions.
Mhm.
If they're buying a building, they're making millions potentially.
Right.
But they're not buying a big commercial building from a land bank. That's the economic development side of the house, right? So a lot of what the land bank thing with the flippers is guiding them to do the socially beneficial thing, show them how they can make money. Again, that idea of you have to improve your practice a little bit. I can't bring you into the meeting when you look like that. You got to clean yourself up a little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to show you how to get these properties and make money. And as long as you kind of do what you're supposed to do, don't cut corners too bad, or say you're going to rehab a property and then just go slap some paint over the shit that's there and call that a finish.
That's the dark side of it. Yeah.
Or that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're actually doing.
That's very clear to me that that's not what's happening.
Well, and that is what you'll get people who come in who will say, I can, I had that experience at the land bank where people would come in and say, yeah, I can, like this. And I would just think, no, you can't. I know you can't, because I know that the houses we're dealing with can't be flipped that quickly. And so if your mindset is you're coming in focused on the quick flip, you're not my guy.
Yeah.
My guy is the guy who comes in and says, yeah, this is a house that's got good bones, or this is a house that I could work with this. This has got some problems, but I could work with this. But if you come in with, dollar signs, right, I'm like, you're not the guy. At least you're not the guy for me.
No, I think it's great, and I think here's what I think is great is for the business you're running, there's a moral integrity, and the way that you have in everything we've talked about, you've got a macro view on how the work that you're doing plays into that, right?
Yeah.
I asked a question about what problems are we solving, land banks, and jumped right into wage, right? We're
solving.
Tied, yeah.
I mean, land banks. Most of the places where land banks exist are in the eastern part of the United States, east of the Mississippi River.
Okay.
I don't know if this is still the case. It probably isn't the case today, but there was a time not long ago where if you wanted to see where all the land banks were, you had to find the list of all the properties that GM had, where they had their factories.
Oh, interesting. Because
the auto industry, the supply chain that GM had was so big, and it touched so many communities. I'm going to guess 99% of the world have never even contemplated this.
Yeah.
But if you think about a car that was made in the United States, all the parts that were in that car were made somewhere in the United States. The seats, the seat belts, the turn signal, the parts of the engine, all the parts of the little fans that was in the engine. That was
in many of those manufacturing plants.
Right?
Yeah.
That was made
around the doors.
So that was made in one factory, put on a truck, and driven to another location and they assembled these. They talk about the parts that they're assembling and so forth. So if you think about GM's supply chain, and it goes from Detroit or Flint to Fort Wayne, and then from Fort Wayne it goes to Anderson or other communities in Indiana. They all flow up to Flint, right?
Yep.
Now GM says, we're taking that whole factory and we're sending it over to Korea, or we're sending it to Taiwan, we're sending it to Mexico,
somewhere else. Yep.
That whole supply chain shriveled up and ended.
Yeah.
All those communities suffered the loss of the factory, loss of jobs, people moved away, right? So a lot of what land banks are dealing with is the industrial shift from a manufacturing economy to a services and financial economy, where you don't need all those factories, you don't need all those workers. Automation, AI. I was invited to to moderate a panel presentation about AI, and I said, I have to tell you, I'm going to talk about the dislocation of workers because of AI. Is that what you want me to do? Oh yeah, sure, whatever. So we're at a land bank conference, and I said, what concerns me about AI is everyone is talking about AI in terms of how it's going to make life and work more efficient, and you're able to make stuff happen much quicker because AI can solve your problems for you and so forth. I said, if we're in the space of putting communities back together and we're bringing in AI to replace the human activity that's currently being done by people, what is the kind of downstream implications of that? people are like sort of scratching, what's he getting at? I said, people are going to lose their jobs. A lot of the call center work, a lot of the billing work, a lot of the paper movement work, all that's going to be gone because of AI. Graphic design, AI. Content creation, AI. Copywriting, AI. Advertising, AI. You name it, AI. So as I'm describing it, you can see people starting to, like the look you're having.
Sure.
Starting to do
It's a common
the mental
conversation.
math about how many jobs is this going to. So, and what I was saying to them is that all of those jobs, people are living in their houses, paying their bills with the jobs they have. AI is going to remove those jobs. It means you're going to have a big vacancy problem. Oh, okay. Here's the negative. Here's the naysayer.
Yeah.
This is the role I was playing. And I said, and I'm not saying it to naysay. I'm saying is I think you need to plan. You know, then you look at AI in terms of data centers. I'm sure you've seen a ton of this. The demand on water and electricity. Everyone's talking now about why my electricity rates are going up. Well, it's because the AI data centers are absorbing all the electricity, and the utility companies are passing the charges on to the ratepayers. Now, my guess is within a couple of years that will have sorted itself out.
Sure.
But in the short term, my electric bill is going up because there's a data center that's drawing all the electricity. So we would talk about, well, you've got this small community out here in the rural areas where there's lots of land, and Microsoft now wants to build a 200,000 square foot data center right here in your backyard. Doesn't that sound awesome? So I think I do try to think about sort of systems perspective. I do try to think about things in terms of like longer term, like what's going to happen 2, 3, 5 years out. And I also have to remind myself, even as we're sitting here talking, like I don't know a lot about AI. I know a little bit. I don't know that I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
So I feel like what I'm trying to do is get people to at least think about, if you're the county who is going to approve that data center, have you thought about what it's going to do to your water quality of life and your utility rates?
Right. What's the blast radius? Yeah. 100%.
And if you haven't thought about that, like there was a guy, I saw a presentation I thought was so fascinating. It was a guy who is a urban planner, a consultant that does urban planning projects for cities. And his main skill set is quantifying the cost per mile of your economic development activity in terms of as you build your infrastructure. Now, again, this is an area where people who are in that space might be like, duh, we all do that. I didn't see all of them. I saw this guy did his piece. And so what he was describing is he's like, if you're a city or a county planner and someone comes along and says, I want to build a Walmart in this greenfield area of town, but I need you to extend the infrastructure out. That's the trade-off. I will bring you the Walmart with all the jobs and the retail,
the roads and
but you got to build the road, the plumbing, and electricity out there. Okay, so the city says fine. So Walmart puts in their facility, and now you, as the city or county, is maintaining this road and this infrastructure that now extends out to wherever.
Right.
Now a developer comes along and says, I want to build a residential development. I want to build it near the Walmart because there's all this great retail. So I'm going to take another chunk of greenfield. I'm going to push the utilities in the road. What this guy was saying is he's like, the minute that you built the first mile of road or whatever out, you just increased your downstream costs. And he does this chart and he shows this is what you're going to be paying for to maintain that road forever. Walmart paid you for the first year. You are paying for years to
200. Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, that's so like, duh. The number of, and this is a big municipal conference, the number of people in the room who you could see the light bulbs going off like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. Oh, our tax base is going to get creamed because we don't have the money to pay for that.
Yeah.
You know, road maintenance and so forth. So I think that you have to, I don't know, maybe it's just the way I'm wired, but I feel like you just have to be thinking about these things. And I'm personally comfortable raising a question about something that I may not know a lot about.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I might ask a question that you realize is a dumb question. It's not dumb to me. Maybe I am dumb, but that's okay. Like, teach me something, explain something.
Yeah, student then a teacher. So it's fascinating. So kind of wrapping up.
Yeah.
We touched on so many different topics that I feel like each there are several topics that we had in there that I think could almost be a conversation and podcast on its own.
Yeah.
What I think could be interesting is where might, so people that got either enlightened or struck a chord about things such as land banks, things such as urban developments,
Yeah.
things such as, building out communities and the social and environment impacts and that sort of stuff. What are some places for someone that wants to learn more you might recommend they take a look?
Oh boy. I mean, I think it's going to sound trite, but I think internet, Google research is super valuable.
Sure.
There's so much content. There's so much information out there today. It's mind numbing how much information there is. So I think it's important for people to kind of pick a lane.
Yeah.
And then, drill into the level of depth they want to on their own, just studying and learning and so forth. There are groups that people can join for, learning and fellowship and networking and so forth.
Yeah. What are a couple that come to mind?
Well, if you're a builder flipper, like in Chicago as an example, there are neighborhood builders groups that are all the landlord and real estate development folks. They get together. And when I first started working in community development, I didn't know these people even existed.
Right.
So
I asked.
Yeah. Well, so, and so I used to, as the affordable housing advocate, I used to go to meetings of the builders groups because I wanted to hear what the builders were doing.
Yep.
And they would kind of look at me like, why are you here? And I would say, because I want to learn from you guys.
Yeah.
You're actually building. I'm as the advocate trying to tell you to build this thing for me.
Yeah.
I need to understand whether what I'm asking you is realistic or fair or equitable or I
love it.
I don't know what you do. So I'm here, and it took a long time for people to realize like, oh, he is an affordable housing guy. He is going to ask us to do stuff that we don't want to do. He is going to, harangue us about things, but he's also going to show up.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of it about that is showing up. So joining groups, if you're a bigger developer or you're getting started, you want to go to like a ULI, Urban Land Institute type group or Congress for New Urbanism. There are like meetup groups and, more social media based groups that are all over the place. There's a group called Strong Towns.
Okay.
They got started. I think he's a planner I think he was out of somewhere in Minnesota that got started doing this Strong Towns movement. And I've been really fascinated to see how big it has gotten and how quickly it has gotten big.
Oh. And
the concept of the Strong Towns is kind of a take. Are you familiar at all with New Urbanism?
Sure.
So it's kind of a take on New Urbanism. It's compact urban design, but it's also not doing some of this transportation infrastructure like extending.
It's a reduction of transportation infrastructure.
It's like, let's not build out into the green fields. Let's condense. Let's remove these huge 4-lane roads that run through the middle of town and let's put in, So it's a very much of an argument that they're making. Like, this is what you should do. It's very prescriptive in that way. But there's, hundreds of these groups that have formed, like, in Oak Park, Strong Towns group. And it's a network of people who just adhere to the Strong Towns concept, and they organize and they work on it, and the product of their work kind of comes out in different ways. They might be advocating for removing bridges, or they might be advocating for, not extending the highway, or they might be talking about doing something with pedestrian infrastructure. So I'm on the north side.
Yeah.
To get from where I am to downtown, there's no convenient way to do it driving. So I take the train, which is fine because we have all the train access north and south. On the rare occasions I have to go somewhere in the car, in the neighborhoods, I'm constantly frustrated by how the city is shrinking the drivable street.
Sure.
Right? So if you go down Clark Street on the far north side,
you're never getting home,
there's bump outs and pedestrian islands and bike lanes. It's all crowding further and further into what used to be the drivable area. The sort of philosophical side of me says this is great because this is what we should be doing to reduce the number of cars on the street. The practical, selfish person says, I can't get where I'm going in less than 45 minutes, where I used to take 15.
Right.
Because driving has become almost impossible. So that's, as an example, that's like a Strong Towns argument, which is they'd say, you should shrink the street, make it more pedestrian friendly. And the the suffering that we're going to go through over the next 5 years as we transition that's a cost we all will just have to deal with. And I think it's really interesting to be in the middle of these conversations where like, I'm the one that will raise the hand and say, hey, while we're shrinking the street, what have we done to accommodate the mother or father that needs to get to the school to pick up their kids after school? What's the thought process for that person?
So I love that. So, and I think that's a great way to wrap up too, because I think so many of the things that you touched on in the conversation today touch all of us, because we're talking about real estate, we're talking about communities, we're talking about wage and income and all these things. And there's, my question was, where might I look to find more information? And so that is very much a educational pursuit, but getting involved with something like Strongtown is a way to actually step in and get involved with. Yeah,
joining a local network. You know, early in my career, when I first got into community development, I was coming out of an academic background where I was doing policy work and working on a dissertation. And so a lot of what I had learned in the classroom was then I was trying to transfer it into applying it in the real world. And a lot of it didn't transfer. Or there were, conditions that were not in the classroom that were in the real world that you had to deal with. So as I've gotten longer into my career or older in my career or whatever, I've just told people like, just get involved and work with somebody who's doing this. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to think you need to know all the answers. Have some questions and plug in and do the work. And the path or the idea or the best way of going about it will reveal itself from your experience. But I think too often there are people who try to create something without actually having done the research to see if this actually already exists, and invariably it probably does. And then there's ones that will, on their other side, the people who tell you what things should be, who've never done a damn thing in their life. And I'm like, why am I taking any guidance from you? What have you done? 24-year-old, 24-year-old Brian. So anyway.
That's awesome. Brian, this is an enlightening conversation.
Good.
A lot of great topics.
Good.
Appreciate it.
I hope you can use some of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Use the whole thing.
Use the whole thing. Okay.